Sergeant 1911 here today out in the hideout. And today we're going to talk about something that's old, no longer new, but old. We're going to go back to the Civil War and talk about some of the rifles that were used in particular the Enfield rifles that came from the Brits, whatever. And I'm going to talk a little bit of how they changed over the time. One of the things a lot of people do know or may not know is that the Springfield rifles and the Enfield rifles all shot a 5.77 mini ball. You may have heard of them, mini balls. 500 grains of lead, humongous bullet. So we have a lot of damage done to the human body when these things hit. But one of the things that we don't all know is that how these things evolved and how long they were actually in service. So we're going to go back and start with the 1853 three-band pattern Enfield rifle that was supplied to the Confederate side by the British Empire. And you'll notice that they call them a three-band Enfield because they were made by the Enfield company in Britain, and they have three bands that actually hold the rifle together, hence your three-band Enfield. Now these were muzzle loading rifles. That's nothing that I have to explain to anybody, but I will. You put your powder charge down the barrel, then you stuff your 500 grain mini ball down there and cram it. You put a cap on the end of it and you shoot it. This is the 1853 model. Now that was fine when the Americans fought the Civil War with it. Both sides, North and South, used it, picking up battlefield or whatever. And this is an original rifle from that period. Now, we come along later, about 1865, the Civil War ends, and in 1866 we have a guy named Jacob Snider, who's an American, who said, you know, we can do better than this muzzle-loaded thing. Now we already had some Sharps rifles out there, a few. We had some Spencer rifles, a few, but there was not a lot of great number of single cartridge rifles. Well, Snider says we need to be able to load faster. And what he did, he took the old 1853 model Enfield and he changed it to a rifle that uses a cartridge. It flips open. If you'll notice, this is the same three-band Enfield rifle that we held up just a second ago. If you grab it again here, they're virtually identical, if you can see. Kind of awkward, but if you can see, they're virtually identical with the exception of this breech. So Jacob Snider says, you know what? We're going to just keep these rifles. Instead of manufacturing new rifles, we're going to take a saw to these things and we're going to add this little open and closed breech here. And we're going to put a big old hunk of lead in there and we're going to make it a single shot black powder rifle. Now, because the barrels were already at 5.77, we kept using this big chunk of lead, this 5.77 500 grain lead. We kept using it, just we loaded it in brass. This rifle here is called the long rifle. It's like 36 inches of barrel, so it's long. It isn't an original 1853 Enfield. We just made it so it shoots a cartridge now. So now instead of 3 rounds a minute, we're getting 10 rounds a minute. So we're getting a lot. So that goes along for a while, and then we decide, you know what, we need a little shorter one. So then we go out and we get a cavalry carbine. This barrel here is like 22 inches long. Same thing, it's an 1853 Enfield that we've cut off some of the stock. We've only got one barrel band, but we got the same action here. It shoots the same 5.77 Snider round that Jacob made out of that same gun. Now this rifle here in particular, from my best research, it's got some what I believe to be Egyptian writing, and I can know from some research that some of these rifles were issued to the Egyptian police. Now what's interesting about that, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, the British had a way of doing things. What the British do with all their colonies around the world, as the Brits got new weapons, they give their colonies, their step down guys, their old crap. So the British colonists never had quite the quality or quantity of weapons that the Brits had. So as the British got new weapons, they would hand me down to their colonists. Sound like a good plan, right? I got a fully automatic weapon, you got a muzzleloader. You can't compete. So is that a way that the British kept a hand up? It may have been, it may not have been. It just maybe they just wanted to find a way to arm them. But you think if they really wanted to arm them equally, they would have issued them the same weapons that the Brits had. Not the case. This one here being the cavalry carbine. Now we're going to go one I like here. This is the artillery carbine. It's only got a 19.5-inch barrel. It's the same setup as the cavalry. One thing we'll see a little bit difference that I'm sure is just missing on these others, and we look real closely here, we've got a safety. It's just a little cover on a chain that'll go over the firing pin and keep the hammer from falling on the firing pin. Now, that's pretty neat. But, you know, it's probably the same thing on the others, but just missing. Now, the way these things unloaded, you open this flap, and if you'll notice, I can pull it back like that. And we have a little piece right here, that extractor that will extract the brass. Now, all of these do that, but I can extract it and load one at a time. It's just as fast, just as effective as the 45-70 when it come around in the 1870s, which is slightly after this. So we really don't know if one stole ideas from the other or whatever. Anyway, these Snider Endfields, they stayed in production and in use up until about 1880. In 1880, the British comes out with what they call a Martini Henry. It also shot a brass round, single shot, had a long lever. Unfortunately, I don't have one to show you, but you can imagine this long rifle with just a long, like a lever action on it, shoots one round at a time. And then you don't hear the name Enfield in that, but you do hear Martini Henry. After the Martini period, which was only another 20 years or so, now we get back to the Enfield. We have a Metford Enfield. Then we get Lee Enfields. I'm not well enough diverse or educated on the Enfield name to know why we have Enfield, Enfield, Enfield. Look, we skip Enfield, then we have Enfield, Enfield, Enfield. You guys out there in YouTube land may know. Send me some information. Let me know how that Enfield name runs. I think one thing I would like to say is ammunition for these things is almost extinct. On occasion, you can find a box of these for $90 to $100 for a box of 20 rounds. But they're not factory made. They're going to make them like I make them, and maybe I'll make some for you someday. It's a 24 gauge brass shotgun shell that we cut the length down on. We have to anneal the brass because we run it through a sizer, it'll crack. So we have to make that brass soft enough to bend. We load it with 75, 80 grains of black powder, and then we put that big old mini ball on the top of it, and what we've got is an absolutely huge bullet that's single shot. You know, it's roughly a little larger than a 45-70. It's not that big a difference. They're fun to shoot. You know, I challenge anybody to find these old guns. A lot of people will be afraid to shoot them. Don't be afraid to shoot them. Look at them closely. Make sure there's no loose parts. Make sure there's no cracks. Examine them. Make sure. And then when you go out and shoot one, don't go out and load it up to the maximum level and abuse the gun and have a potential dangerous explosion to hurt yourself or someone else. Load it lightly. The gun is still fun. It's fun to shoot. You know, it doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to be old. The point is that we take these old antiques and we go back and they're still useful today and we can all have some fun. And I think that's what we need to do right now. Let's go outside of the hideout and have some fun. Okay, here we are out at the range. Before we get started, I want to give you one little quick glimpse of these homemade ammo I've made. Here's this 5.77 mini ball that I had talked about earlier, that 500 grains of lead. Now I actually make these myself. You can order them online, but I do it old school. I melt down the tire weights and I heat it up and put it in a bullet mold and do it myself. Now here is the 24 gauge brass shotgun shell that we have resized it, shaped it, and put this big bad boy down inside of it. So you can see we got a big piece of lead going down range. and we're going to try to shoot some here. What I've done is I've brought out only one of the rifles. To be honest with you, I'm too lazy to clean all four of those rifles. Everybody knows black powder is nasty. So what I've got is the artillery version, and I'm going to load it up and take a few shots, and who knows, we may shoot several times. Let me get my glasses on, my eye protection. This black powder and these old rifles, you know, they're safe, but let's make sure they're safe. Let's get going here. Try to load it up, pull that open, slide my bullet in, close it up. Let's see what we can do. I missed. Now, I'm kind of one of those determined people. I'm going to shoot until I hit something. So I'm going to pull the hammer back slightly. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to pull it back. You'll see a cartridge just fell right back to the rear. I'll dump it out. Let me lay several over here where I can get to them. I'm going to put the ears on and shoot again. I'll start a little closer at the Dell machine. Slide it in. Close the breech. Cock the hammer. We had another one go off. Now, in some states, because this weapon is so old, you can actually deer hunt with them. Unfortunately, where I live, it has to be muzzle loader. You can see this is not a muzzle loader. Some states call it something else, like an antique weapon hunt or something like that, but not here. Our game and fish just quite not buying into it. I'm going to try again to see if I can get that gong. That gong is pretty big, and I'm just not shooting worth crap. Boy, it must have breezed by it. It must barely hit it looked like. The good thing about shooting these things, black powder is pretty easy to get yet. They're easily reload. When you first make them, it's a little bit difficult because of the sizing. You know, you have to size the brass and everything, but once you get it made one time, you really don't have to size it again. Boy, that's terrible. I can't hit that. You think that's why there were so few people killed in those wars? Let me see if I can determine if I'm shooting high or low. I think I might be shooting a little bit low. Maybe I'm shooting a little bit high. I know one thing. If my wife was waiting for me to bring home the bacon with this thing, I'd be starving to death. I still can't hit it. Try another one. By now I've determined I'm not going to hit anything. You know what? I think that's enough today. I'm not going to hit anything. I have a lot of fun. These old guns are always fun. Man, all guns are fun. The thing is, find you a piece of history, do some research on it, play with it, tinker with it, enjoy your time with it, and go have some good times. Make sure you, if you would guys, click subscribe, click like. I'd really appreciate it. Until you come back to the next video, hooah.